What is up, guys? Today I'm going to make a complete beginner's guide on Simulated Universe. Now this video is mainly going to be going over basics with some more advanced stuff mixed in. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Alright, first we can start with some general tips for Simulated Universe, like the fact that you can upgrade here to get passive buffs, and that these things here that give ornaments are worth farming even if you can only beat the first elite, because the relics that you get out of these can be game changing. These are the second half of your relics, which you don't unlock till later on in the story, and you can't obtain these through chests or caverns, only Simulated Universe. Another thing to mention is in Simulated Universe, upon defeating an enemy, you will get a blessing, which is a temporary buff that will last until the end of your run. Now, when you click to start a run, you will get a choice of what path to use. What does this mean? Well, for the most part, I think of it as another mechanic that is only available in Simulated Universe, which gives you an extra ability to use. Now, paths. Which should I choose them? For the most part, any of these easily work. The best choice just depends on your team. I'll say some simple ones for those that just want to get started. Hunt is good for increasing damage, abundance buffs your healing, and lastly preservation buffs your shield strength. Now of course, these choices can be more complex with different teams and strategies, but those are the basics. Now for those that want a bit more depth, I'll continue for a bit and elaborate. For those that don't, timestamp to skip to the next session is going to be shown. Okay, let's explain. From left to right, preservation. Now this path is all about stronger shields, buffing allies that have a shield, and doing damage based on your shield when hit, and even creating shields. This is just the easiest way to explain it, so I'll just move on. Remembrance is all about freezing enemies. Now this one might seem weaker at a glance, but is actually very strong, and not just due to the turn skip that freeze does. So the main strength of this path comes down from a debuff called dissociation. This buff does 30% of the target's max health as damage on their turn, and is something which with the right blessings can be put on enemies, then activated immediately, then put again. This path is one of the best and enables some of the easiest clear in the entire game, if it wasn't for bosses having either a high chance to resist freeze or a complete immunity to freeze. Moving on, Nihility. This is your dot path for any damage over time like shock, burn, and wind shear. This one is quite simple, buffs dot damage, lets you activate it on hits, and can even double the activation on enemies' turns. Overall, simple and good path. Abundance is the MVP path for survivability. Buffs heals to the extreme, can cleanse debuffs. Quite a simple path like the last one. It is amazing against Kafka due to the team-wide debuff cleanse, and with this path your characters will be full HP consistently. Hunt. Now this is my favorite and go-to path for most comps, just because most blessings are a simple damage boost that can increase crit rate, increase crit damage, and increase speed. This path also features a couple blessings that can give you multiple turns in a row, as long as you defeat or weakness break enemies. This allows for easy work of most enemies and even some bosses. All in all, amazing choice, would recommend to most people. Destruction. This path is a bit of a mix between damage and survivability. I would say this is a good choice if you want to buff both aspects. A lot of blessing of this path revolve around increasing attack and defense through a buff called Fighting Spirit, which does both. Elation. This is a path focused around buffing solely follow-up attacks and to some extent ultimates. So only run this if you can consistently do follow-up attacks, because if not, any other path is better, as almost every blessing focuses on follow-up attacks. Now the next two paths aren't available unless you're playing Golden Gears or Storm Disaster. That being Propagation. This is the path for any skill point heavy units or teams. Everything revolves around skill point consumption and recovery. This path also does offer buffs for basic attacks and is the only path to do so. Erudition. This one is all about ultimates, buffering their damage, crit stats, and even allowing you to use 2 ultimates in a row. This one combos well with Auspicious Star from the Hunt path and is a very powerful on most teams. Okay, all done with paths. What else? Well, knowing the layout of Simulated Universe also helps you plan your clear. There is a bit of randomness to this, so I'll just say the rooms that are guaranteed to spawn in all the time. The first room of Simulated Universe, as you all have experienced, is a combat room, which will have 3 enemies inside. It is the simplest room that most should have no trouble getting past. The second and third room is a choice between another combat domain or an occurrence domain. Now, I am not going to list every occurrence as they vary in rewards and difficulty. Just know that these rooms can be very rewarding or give you a tough fight. The fourth room is always an elite domain, which will have the object that gives ornaments if you can defeat the elite enemy inside to claim the relics. Now following every elite domain, you always have a respite domain where you can revive fallen teammates once you get that upgrade, or change team members if you want. There's also a herder here, which you can use to consume the cosmic fragments you have accumulated. Now the 6th domain will be another combat domain, then the 7th can be random, while the 8th will always be the 2nd elite domain, followed up by the 9th being the respite domain. Following those two, it could be a bit RNG till the 12th domain for the boss, where it's always another respite, where you can choose to do the same as the previous respite rooms, except Hurdle will now only upgrade your blessings you have collected. Anyways, that is the general layout, with the boss being the last and the most difficult. Now the bosses are different depending on what world you're going up against, which you can see when you select the world. Each of these bosses have their own unique mechanics and different strategies to beat them. I'll do a quick overview for each and every boss. Japard is the boss of World 3, and besides summoning a couple guards every phase, his mechanic is his shield. This shield is very strong and can take a lot of hits, however it is a linked to all enemies and only has a certain amount of HP. So simply, let's say it has 100 HP and you do an AoE attack that does 34 damage to 3 enemies, that will break a shield. This shield is especially vulnerable to dot damage as it doesn't defend against that damage at all, letting you bypass it completely. Svarog is the boss of World 4. He summons a lot of robots every phase, with the first phase being full of trash mobs, the second with elites, and the third he summons these robot hands that can't capture your party members, making them unable to take actions until the hand is defeated. Svarog is dangerous, but he and every robot have a common weakness of lightning, which you can exploit to consistently break enemies. Of course, in this fight, having 2 DPS is a requirement, as you will need someone available at all times to free allies. Kafka is one of the tougher fights for new players. She is the boss of World 5 and has a unique mechanic making allies turn on each other and be out of your control. The biggest counter to Kafka is any form of debuff cleanse, preferably an AoE cleanse that would be either your Link's ultimate or going the abundance path for the cleanse from the path resonance. Besides that, Kafka is one of the easiest fights, though she can do a lot of damage relatively quickly. Cocolia is also a relatively simple boss. She is the boss of World 6, and she does a lot of damage and will be constantly trying to spam this one AoE attack that takes an extra turn to charge. For this boss, doing consistent damage will let you go to the second phase, where you immediately got to target Bronya. The enemy Bronya will let the boss do massive damage to your team, and honestly, besides that, her boss fight overall is simple and easy. For World 7, we got the Deer. This guy is simple to defeat, and while he does do a lot of damage, he is basically a DPS check. He summons these trees near him constantly, which will either heal him or CC you, but they are relatively easy to take out. For this boss, the hump path is amazing, letting you easily clear the trees if you get any of these blessings, and overall another simple fight with little mechanics. Yinking, he is garbage as a 5-star but decent as a boss. He is in World 8, what used to be the final world till recently. He fights you completely alone, though he does summon a lot of swords. These swords don't do much damage and will weaken him if they are destroyed quick enough. This fight really tests out your sustain character for the most part, as besides the sword summoning and some big AoE attacks, Yanking doesn't summon any elite enemies. Overall, an easy fight if your characters are fully built and can take a hit. Finally, we reach World 9, the newest addition. Now this boss is a bit weird. He has a mechanic where at the beginning of each phase, he will recharge your team's ult to full and will then target the first 2 allies to use their ults. This puts them in a weird cage, kind of like Svarog. Of course, you can break them out, where they will be freed with their ultimates ready for use. So, like the previous, he is more of a DPS test and can easily be defeated. The effect of the cage is also impossible to resist with effect res, as I have found out with my Gallagher, who is sitting at over 100% resist. Anyways, that is all for the video. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or need help with a certain boss fight, let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe if you aren't already, and I'll see you guys later.